So let's start maybe just by you telling us about yourself.
Oh Lord, where do you start? So I've been a journalist for about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I started off with data entry and media in Ireland in a company called entertainment.ie. I used to do all the cinema listings. Back then, it was where you found out what was on in the cinema. We would import all the cinema listings for every single cinema in Ireland. So it was like by hand into a system. So we did that for about a year and a half. And I then graduated to being a film critic, and kind of refined my writing while I was there. Went up to being a senior writer, went off to a publication then called Joe.ie to be the editor, went back to entertainment.e to be the editor, and then ran a production arm of the company when it was taken over. So I did all of the producing, some of the presenting, still a lot more writing, more of a lifestyle type journalist thing, but I ran a production team basically. And then I left that company in 2019, just before the pandemic, to try and make a documentary. And then the pandemic hit. So the documentary was put on hold for a little while.
Yeah.
And like everybody, I think in the pandemic kind of struggled just to kind of get through it, and started working with another company called Reach, who are a big publisher in the UK, and ran a publication for them called Buzz for a year remotely, which was an experience, managing a team of, I think it was 12 journalists remotely during a pandemic who had never met before. We were all hired at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But we did some good work there. So that was the last publication I edited. And then I went off. Then we managed to get some financing, luckily, for the documentary project I wanted to make. And it wasn't the first one I'd made. It's the first one I've directed. It's called Amplified. But during the time when I was running publications and was a journalist, I made two other documentaries that I produced that I was in. One was called 126, and it was based on an ultramarathon run from Limerick to Dublin. I did it with a friend of mine, Brian Marr, and we did it for Special Olympics Ireland. I think we raised about €50,000 for Special Olympics Ireland. And then the following year, I made another documentary called Barbaric Gentleman, which was early 2013 when we started filming, late 2012, just looking at the explosion of mixed martial arts in Ireland. And Conor McGregor was just on the cusp of his first UFC fight as we were filming. And so we shot that for a few months, and I had an MMA fight, and I kept training them for years afterwards. So, but Amplified was the documentary we just made. There was about 12 years difference in between filming of those two things. So documentary and journalism is the what did the kids say? Too long didn't read, TLD, or that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years.
You'd be surprised. There's kind of a change for them, with the younger people that I work with, to actually figure out and listen to people's journeys and how they did it, because there's so much. It's so snappy right now online, But actually, kind of hearing the story, the ups and downs, can help them a lot. But you mentioned UFC. What was that like to train for UFC? Is it as difficult as it looks?
Yeah, it's even more difficult. I had a background kind of in fitness. I've been on a couple of covers magazines doing fitness bits over the years. And with the ultramarathons I've done before that and the other documentary, it's a grind. It's just to switch your brain off or distract your brain with a podcast or whatever it is, or run with somebody to get through the miles and miles and miles you'd be covering. So it could be, we did one training run, I think it was about 90k. And that was a training run. My brother literally dropped us. We hit, I think, 90 kilometers outside of Dublin, just told us to go out of car and we went back. So that's a kind of a mental toughness thing. MMA was a completely different kettle of fish. It's, first of all, it's not something you can do on your own. You have to do it in a class. You have to spar people. You have to, if it's jiu-jitsu, there's like multiple aspects to it. And you also have to have a really good coach. I had a really good coach, a guy called Roddy. He's one of the top striking coaches in the world. And I trained with him out in SPG Charlestown. And I got beaten up for about 3 or 4 months. And then I had a fight.
Yeah.
And I kept training them for years after it. Up until the pandemic, I kept training and I got pretty good at it. But I wasn't getting any younger. So
yeah, I know how you feel.
Yeah. It's an incredible sport, and I'm friends with so many people, still friends with so many people I trained with. But it's a very, very tough sport on the body, not necessarily from the fighting aspect to it or the sparring aspect to it, but just you are so sore after competing, after training, after grappling, whatever it is, that the time it would take to recover and work and kind of function every day.
Right.
I have a brother who is in his mid-50s now, and he trained in jiu-jitsu for years and still trains. And he gets injured every once in a while and he has to take time off work and stuff. So you kind of have to be a bit nuts to kind of...
I think so. I found that myself. During the pandemic, I was in the best shape of my life somehow. And then when we got back into the real world, I found it so hard to get back into it. Just slowly lost everything, no matter what I did. Just kept getting injured. And then I said, you know what? I'm just going to go walk around in circles in the park. I'm not going to do any running, any crazy chin-ups. I'm just going to start with walking and try to get myself back into it, you know? I don't think I'd be cut out for MMA, if I'm being honest with you.
You'd be surprised. I mean, that's what I did during the pandemic as well. I got some equipment because all the gyms shut, and I was so used to training multiple times a week. So I just kind of gathered like an assault bike, which is an echo bike, which is the thing with the two handles on it that you pull with the big wheel at the front. And we got another bike, a Concept 2 ERG bike, and I got some weights. I got some barbells and dumbbells, and that's the stuff I still use today. Now I have to have it at my back garden, and Irish weather isn't very isn't very helpful with. So I have a tarp. I have a big cover on it, put over the weights when it rains, which is quite a lot. But it just, what it did was it just took away the excuses for working out, because the gym to get to the gym, you know, to work out, it's a 2-3 hour thing. Whereas if the stuff is downstairs and you happen to be working from home, or you're lucky enough to be working from home, it's just so handy. But yeah, I haven't gone back to MMA since the pandemic. I'd love to. But
are you on the White House card?
No, I'm not on the White House card. Yeah. Although I don't know how good the money is that the UFC pay at the moment. So I might be worth my while, to be honest.
I think it's going to be raining, which reminds me, it was supposed to be raining today, and I was hoping that the light wouldn't be too much. So excuse the lighting.
Not at all.
But what do you make of this event
of the White House card? I mean, it's weird.
Yeah,
like, Dana White's in the documentary we made, so I interviewed him first.
Full disclosure, I tried to rent it, but my VPN wouldn't let me. I think it was only €5, which is a great deal, but my VPN wouldn't let me. So I've just been watching clips on Amplified, everything like that. But when I get back to Ireland, I'm going to buy it.
Not at all. It's Amplified is available to rent, but the other one, Barbaric Gentleman, is the MMA one. That's on YouTube. You can watch that. So Dana White's in that.
What's it called? Barbaric?
Barbaric Gentleman. So that's on YouTube. We made it for Irish TV years ago. We just put it on YouTube, and like, Dana White's an interesting character. The UFC was back then a bit of a counterculture thing. There was a contrarian element to it, that people that typically gravitate towards mixed martial arts and the UFC most likely weren't into your more popular sports. So a lot of the people are trained weren't really into, not everybody, but we're not really into football or rugby or GAA somewhere, but a lot weren't. And that's kind of, I think, an indication of the type of people who gravitate towards the sport. Great people a lot of people who I'm still pals with. And Dana White, who is the head of the organization, or used to be the head of the organization, he's kind of more of an ambassador now, I think, has always been very friendly with Donald Trump. And even during the last campaign in 2024, Donald Trump was walking out at USC events with, like, Mike Johnson, who's the Speaker of the House, and like Elon Musk and stuff, and they were getting walkout music.
There was something very Rome about it, like walking out the Coliseum.
And look, there's something about, I think, if you're a fighter, and I was only ever an amateur fighter, but if you're a fighter, there's something about the UFC being the pinnacle of combat sports. The sport has kept growing, and the walkout and the music and the walkout into the octagon is a huge part of the visualization that you use when you're training, because it's such a big deal. And Donald Trump, they just let him walk out and give him some walkout music. And then Dana White can say it's not political, and the UFC can say they're not political, but like, I mean, clearly. And the card at the White House lawn, I think Donald Trump or that administration realizes that at least a couple of years ago, maybe not so much now, but a huge part of his base probably gravitated towards that sport. And it feels like a safe space for him, I would imagine, in a lot of respects.
So I'm just getting up. I have my questions everywhere. This kind of makes me think of one of your, not your first interview. You started to delve in 2017.
Yeah, I've got to mention the delve. I started to delve. There was a version of the delve called the manual that I'd started in 2015, and then it evolved to the delve in 2017, 2018, when I ran production for the publication I was talking about, the media house in Dublin. One of the things I did was a show called the delve, and that carried through from 2018, where we did it in studio, all the way through until the end of 2022, where I did a bunch of interviews remotely during the pandemic.
I remember watching, I think last week after I sent you the email, I saw that you interviewed Jordan Peterson.
Oh, yeah.
And because, you know, Amplified is about American rhetoric reaching Ireland. Peterson was doing shows, debates with Sam Harris and what was the other gentleman's name?
Douglas Murray.
Douglas Murray, yeah. So that was kind of an idea of how, you know, evidence that it had come to Ireland, even though Peterson's Canadian. I've been thinking about this. Do you think he was like one of the first exporters in a way, and also one of the first kind of casualties of it? Because he was, after all, a professor, grabbed the free speech thing in Canada, Bill C-16, message came to America. He kind of helped put it into a intellectual kind of way of saying it, and then he spread it, and then I don't know what happened to him. It's none of my business, but perhaps it became too much for him and fell off the map a small bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think back then, that was 2018 when I spoke to him, and back then he was, at least seemed, I haven't kept up with him in the last few years, but he at least seemed to be more open to being wrong. Right. And you can watch interviews with him. Yeah. I think Jim Jeffries did an interview with him, and for a show that Jim Jeffries had at the time, the comedian Jim Jeffries. And at a certain point in the interview, Jordan Peterson goes, "Oh, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I need to think about that." And that's Peterson was part of this kind of group, which was, in retrospect, is cringe, called the Intellectual Dark Web.
Yeah, it was bad.
And I had Dave Rubin on, who was somebody who would have, you know, I had a very nice conversation with Dave Rubin. I'm not sure I'd have a conversation with him now.
I haven't spoken to the people. I've spoken to great people, but I haven't spoken to people you've spoken to. Dave Rubin is one person nowadays I don't think I'd be able to have a conversation with. No, I think he's probably fallen down the rabbit hole a little bit. When I spoke to him, it was the year after Peterson. Really, really nice guy. He came into the studio with his husband, like just open chat. Rubin was always the kind of more slicker, traditional broadcast version of those guys. So, wasn't the, I don't know, whether you think Jordan Peterson's an intellectual powerhouse, he was a professor and a PhD, I think so, in clinical psychology. So, you know, he knew what he was talking about in some respects. Whatever direction he went in, you know, he obviously pushed some boundaries and, you know, went to too far a place in a lot of respects. It felt like he had a perfect duvet for the bed, but he just wanted to stretch it over the whole room. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think he, like, going into stuff like Elliot Page and all, like why are you talking about this stuff? Just leave him alone. Like that stuff is ridiculous. That's all part of the I think the attention economy. And I think something that happens as well is, it might have happened with Dave Rubin a little bit, but I think less so. But I think what happened with Jordan Peterson is that I think he probably felt like he got pushed more and more to the right, in that you get so much flack online from people, you get so much pushback, and it's not real. Like, I don't have a Twitter account anymore. It became utterly pointless for me, but it's not real. But when you've got pylons on the internet, and it doesn't matter where you like politically, they happen, especially if you put stuff out there and enough people follow you. And I feel like that pushed him further and further to a place maybe where he wasn't willing to be as wrong. But Dave Rubin certainly went to that place. You know, when the documentary Amplified we made, we really tried to get people from, and I don't like monoliths, this is something I've said over and over in interviews, from quote the right. And as you've mentioned, I've spoken to people from the right, or what you would call controversial people, and a lot of traditional American politicians are political figures from the right as well. So people like Sean Spicer or even Mark Esper, these people who are involved in administrations and Republican administrations, and none of them would speak to us for the documentary. And when I spoke to journalists within the American system, high-end big journalists within the American political system who worked within the American political system, some of whom had written books on the Republican Party, they just said off camera, they were like, no Republicans, because it was about rhetoric. They were like, no Republicans going to speak to you about this. So, and then there's attempts on Donald Trump's life, and all they want to talk about is rhetoric. But we'd wrap production at that stage. And the doc was getting ready to be out in the world. But there's a lot of hypocrisy like that in that space, and it's not a side thing. I think it's just people suit their own agendas and will push their own agendas to whatever suits their narrative. And that's when I think you get disingenuous arguments, and you see a lot of that with American politicians in particular.
100%. There was something I heard you say at the beginning, how you said you left your job, your steady job, let's just call it that. And you said, I'm going to go make this documentary. Then the pandemic happened. I had the similar thing. I was about to leave my job in 2019. Then the pandemic happened, and I said I better not do that. So instead, I left it. I'm not saying you should have done that, but
in retrospect, I probably should have.
It was my mom. She was like, Peter, no. I stuck around in the job for another 2.5 years, and then didn't renew my contract, and then did it, and it was very, very difficult. But for you, I'm not saying I didn't have less to lose than you, but you kind of did have a lot to walk away from. You know, you had built, a pretty good career, in my opinion. So this documentary must have meant the world to you to make. Could you talk to us about that decision process and the beginning of the journey towards, like, all right, I have to do this?
Yeah, so when I was running entertainment.ie, we kind of had this is maybe end of 2017. Up until then, I ran it for a few years at that point, and we had a really good, strong core team and really good journalists. People I still love very much. That some of them I hired along the way, and some who were already there and stayed there, which is always a good sign of any kind of job when people have been around for a while. And then the company was taken over by a bigger company and bought by a bigger company. So I got experience. They wanted me to be the editor-in-chief, I think, and run the whole. They did a bunch of publications. The company doesn't exist anymore, like a lot of these companies. And I wanted to do producing because I had background in doing some TV bits, and as well as the 2 documentaries I've made at that point. And Dave said, okay, you can run the production for us. This is going to be a big part of what we do. And it was just a different thing than, it got a little bit corporate, which is absolutely fine. But it just became a lot of talking about doing stuff and not actually doing stuff. And the more I was there, the more I realized I just can't be in another meeting where people are talking about ideation for 45 minutes. And, and I was on a really good wage and working with some really talented people, but it just felt like it just felt counterproductive to me. And so the documentary was always, Amplified was always in the back of my head, even a different version of it or whatever it was then. And doing the delve, continuing to do the delve myself was always in the back of my head. I didn't know how I was going to do production-wise, but I'd saved up enough money to get the deposit for what would have been, I suppose, it's well gone now, but what would have been a house somewhere outside of Dublin. And my girlfriend at the time, we were kind of talking about it, and she was like, look, you're unhappy there. Take that money, live off it, and try and get the doc made. And then obviously the pandemic hit, and it took a bit longer, and I had to take another job then. Mm-hmm. But it gave me, the money I'd saved gave me the leeway to explore making the film, to look into stuff like Screen Ireland, who weren't involved with Amplified, but are involved with other projects, and to just figure it out, to give me the leeway to figure out how am I going to do this. So because I was just kind of, not bored isn't the right word, I just wasn't enjoying the job. And at that point, I'm like, is this what I kind of want to do forever if I get locked into a mortgage, or do I want to take a big swing at something I think I could do something really different and really good? And that's kind of what I did. And everything I yeah, well, a lot of the interviews and stuff like that that I've done over the years have been with figures in the US, and that was really where we wanted to go and film a lot of the documentary. And so that's essentially what we did. It was just more of a case of kind of not bored, but just like I just can't do this every single day.
Do something, you know.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law, he won't mind me talking about this. Like he works in the industry. He's worked with for Warner Brothers. He's done commercials in Ireland and everything like that. He knows the industry. He knows how difficult it is, and he's doing great. He's doing a great job making a living. But you know, even he has that kind of creativity back from when he was in his early 20s, teens, even when he was a kid. He's like, you know, I really want to do something. As a writer, I have that as well. Like, I really want to do something. Like, we're working on our own little script and all that kind of thing, sharing it with each other. It's a great way to stay in contact more than anything. And making videos. And one day we'll be like Matt Stone and Trey Parker in the DVD extras of South Park back in the late 90s, and we'll have a Japanese man in the jacuzzi behind us. You know what I mean? Like, whatever about the end product, that's just, we want to make silly DVD extras. But I think every kind of creative kind of has that and must do it at some stage in their life. So fair play to you for taking a huge swing at it, because the documentary, from what I've heard and seen, and I will see when I buy it, is fantastic. There is a great review about it I saw as well. 4 out of 5 stars. It's called like very disquieting. What was to say? It was a great review. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it was your Irish Times gives a great review.
Yeah,
but look, like that's something that when you I used to be a film critic, so and I never really enjoyed it because you're critiquing other people's work, and I wanted to make stuff, and that's the worst kind of person to be a film critic, because you just end up being bitter. So reviews like that are amazing, specifically from somebody like Tara Brady in the Irish Times, who like
Tara Brady,
Tara wouldn't mess around. Like, she's really fair, but like if she doesn't like something, she tells you. If she doesn't like something, she tells you. But we've gotten some bad reviews as well. You know, you can't win.
By who? Like, who would give that a bad review? Because, you know, when I first saw you talk about it on TikTok months ago, you know, I watched as many clips as I could. I'm like, yeah, no, that's something I'd really want to watch now. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's just when you, as I said kind of before, it's like when you put stuff out there, you're going to have people critique it, and like it's like, I thought there's a website Letterboxd where you can write reviews and stuff. We've got a couple of negative reviews in there, and we've got some really positive ones as well, and it's fine. Like, I was a critic, I get it. Sometimes it's whatever mood people are in that day. Sometimes people's perspectives can be frustrating, because you're like, what are you talking about? That's not but that's the price of putting something out there into the world.
Yeah, I don't want to put words in your, I think you said this earlier, you said maybe it had to be put on the back burner a year or two. Would you not think that now, especially, that it's kind of like a perfect time capsule? It was like, this is when it started, you know, but watch it, let's think about this. Because if Conor McGregor, I don't think he has any momentum now, but he got a lot of momentum during the Dublin riots.
Yeah.
You know, and if he can just come on and say, like, the bare minimum of, you know, immigrants bad, this is bad, Ireland is full, all these things, and all of a sudden get all this support online. That's certainly something that we saw in, what was it, 2016 with Donald Trump, where the Republican convention, where he would just say ridiculous things and people would clap.
Yeah, well, the purpose in the documentary was, or for most documentaries I like, not all of them, but it's to contextualize the moment that we're in. And there's a sense, I think, maybe more so in Ireland than other countries. A lot of the documentaries I'd like and enjoy would be HBO-style docs. I think they do incredible work. But it's something is either current affairs or it's lifestyle or it's whatever. But it's either current affairs and stuff that's happening right now, and we're going to talk about what's happening right now. And maybe there's an investigative element to that current affairs doc or whatever it is. Maybe it's prime time, maybe it's something on a Monday night on RC at 9:35 or whatever, whenever they put that stuff out. The American sense of making that stuff is a bit more exploratory and explanatory. So it's a bit more, this has gone on, this is why it's gone on, here's some further context, and this is where we're going. And there has to be an accessibility to I think documentaries are art that wants to make a point, that wants to say something, that wants to explore something or explain something. So by accessibility, I mean that it has to be consumable for anybody watching at home, turning something on, and they're like, okay, this documentary is about the culture wars. Like, it's such a big subject matter, such a broad subject matter. How do I wrap my head around this?
Right.
So if people are popping up on screen who are with the New York Times or are used to work for Obama or used to work for Joe Biden, you're like, oh, for a second you pop up, or an Irish politician, you pop up and you're like, okay, well, this person worked for X, Y, or Z. I kind of want to see what they have to say. And it has to move. So I find some documentaries tend to languish, and for me, maybe it's my undiagnosed ADHD. I like things to move, and that's what we really try to do with it. So, yeah, it's that accessibility thing I think is pretty big, and it doesn't necessarily. This is something I've spoken about before, where that's a huge part of how people get their information now, and not necessarily documentaries or the news. I think if you look at certain figures around the world, but specifically in the US, I think people like Jon Stewart or Seth Meyers or Colbert, even Jimmy Kimmel, these guys who ostensibly host comedy shows and variety shows. Jon Stewart's a master of it. So I think he's a very, 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 very high level of it. But he's basically portraying information, giving information in the form of satire, in a way that's funny, that's engaging, that's entertaining, and that's accessible. So people get their news from him, and he's saying, don't get your news from you or a fake news show, but they get the news from him because he is an expert at delivering that news, or delivering, or again, contextualizing the moment and understand where we are. So again, to use Jon Stewart as an example, you can watch The Daily Show and see what he does with The Daily Show, and you can then go and listen to his podcast, which is really, really deep dive on like foreign policy, economics, really gets into the weeds, really understands policy, really understands how bills are passed, will explain frustrations with something like the Obama administration, why they didn't get bills passed. So it's kind of like a gateway into something that's a bit more deeper. And I think that type of accessibility of content, it cannot be sniffed at, and it doesn't have to be satire. It can be popular culture. It could be a show about politics. The West Wing is a great example of that.
I love that show.
Show about politics, and The Diplomat's one that's on at the moment, that you are learning about. Now it's fictitious, but you are learning about how certain things work from watching a show that's a drama or has fictitious characters. And it's it's not going to be 100% correct, but it should pique your interest enough to go, oh, is that how that works, or is that how an ambassador works, or is that how diplomacy works? And I think that stuff is really, really important.
I sometimes think that there's more real world diplomacy going on in the Oval Office in the movie Independence Day. Do you know what I mean? Like it feels like at least they stop to think about things for 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'd say those days are probably gone now.
Yeah. I mean, watching The West Wing, it's like watching it's like watching a dream, like what you would want it to be like, almost.
Yeah, there's an aspirational element to it for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. But going back to your documentary, Amplified, out of the people you spoke to, who left kind of a lasting impression on you?
John Brennan, who was the director of the CIA, and he used to give security briefings to multiple presidents from I think Bill Clinton onwards. John is a friend now, and his father is from Roscommon, and John is back here a lot, so he's a lovely connection to Ireland. And so John I would keep in contact with, and I like very much. Beto O'Rourke is somebody who ran for Senate and governor and president in the space of about 6 years. He's from Texas, a former congressman from Texas, a place called El Paso in Texas. I think he is a remarkable politician, and a remarkable person who probably is too decent a human being to succeed in modern politics in the way that you do nationally. In that, like, you have to get in the weeds and you have to get a bit nasty. And when you're a decent person and somebody who is ideologically optimistic or ideologically driven, I think that's very, very tough. And so, you mean, he's it's, you know, you see what's happening in Texas. Texas is a very deep red state, and there's a guy running there now called James Talarico, who very well may win and is trying a very different approach. But it was watching how, like, how can somebody this good at orating and who clearly cares, and you know, how are they going to lose an elect? Like, it blew, especially to somebody like Ted Cruz or Greg Abbott.
Yeah.
It blew my mind. So Beto stayed with me because I was and it wasn't necessarily like, you know, like, it's not like I'm standing or I'm a massive fan of a politician, but just as a human being and somebody who stayed with me, his speech is how he spoke, how he genuinely cared, and having met him and spent a bit of time with him, how that's just who he is. And it's kind of, it's painful in a way, because these are the type of people who should be who should be winning an election, but that's just not how you win elections now. You really do need to have the kind of nasty streak. You do need to be, you need to be, you know, you'd say it's good politics, but like, there's a lot of nastiness in modern politics, even in the primaries, even when you're going against people in your own party. And I just don't think Beto had that in him.
Before I move on to Irish politics, I wanted to, this guy, his name popped into my head, John Kariowski, I think. He's popped up in the last year on TikTok everywhere. And I was just, have you ever spoken to him? What are your thoughts? I can give you my thoughts on him.
I don't know who he is, John Kariowski.
I think so. He's a former CIA whistleblower.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Is that his name?
I know. I think so. I know he's literally done every single podcast and I know who you're talking about.
I was just wondering what your thoughts were. He comes in and he agrees with everything the host says, and says that's a very good question, and ingratiates himself so well to become this likable guy. And I'm kind of like, I'm watching it and I'm like, this CIA guy he's got more training than any media figure. Like, this guy walks on a podcast and he is loved to the point where I'm not sure if I would trust him. You know,
yeah,
so charming.
I know it didn't write the name of it when you mentioned it. Yeah, so I'm on Mehdi Hassan. Mehdi Hassan's a show recently, and Mehdi Hassan was like basically called him out on two things that he said, and he backtracked immediately. So that's my most recent impression of him. But I think there's probably an element of congeniality there to get people to like you.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you work for the CIA.
That's such a great point, Mike. That's a fantastic point. That's an insightful point. That's like something he would say about anything you say. You know, say how insightful it is, how great it is, you know, make you feel really big. It's just something I noticed and wondered if you knew more about him. But anyway, Irish politics. What are your thoughts on what's going on in Ireland? Not that there's anything big or huge or dramatic as America, but say Social Democrats, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin. Do you have any opinions or thoughts about the next 2-3 years in Ireland?
Sure. Like, it's very frustrating, Irish politics, because it's kind of by definition, like, it's obviously kind of a parliamentary Republican system, and we've had coalitions since the 90s now at this point. And now, personally, I'm kind of frustrated that there's been no sign of a proper left alliance, like a proper grouping together of clearly, you know, maybe 74% agreed upon policy and agenda that they can't just get it together. So instead, you've got a coalition of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and some independents, where I feel like they'll go wherever way the wind blows, and it feels a little bit reactionary to what's happening in the world. And that's the issue with rotating Taoiseachs and coalitions, in that it's very difficult to plan for the next few years, because you're not going to get the credit for it. Because, well, he's going to be Taoiseach then, or somebody else is going to be Taoiseach then. I live like pretty close to the centre of Dublin, so the Social Democrats just want to see here. It was a by-election. That's not my area, but it's close by. But I would have voted for the Social Democrats in the last couple of elections. And there's a pragmatism to them, as well as kind of that ideologically, I suppose you could call it ideological empathy, where it's a base level empathy of, like, you know, maybe
pretty common sense kind of, you know, decency.
Yeah, and look, but I'm not somebody who's like, this is my party and I'm signed up for this party, or I'm signed up for that. I think we try and import a little bit of the American stuff for politics here and that, and it's just never going to work. And you saw that with, I think, Conor McGregor, but you also see that with somebody like Holly Cairns, who I think is an excellent leader. And I saw somebody compare her to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's a congresswoman from New York, who's a very famous congresswoman in America, who may or may not run for Senate or run for president. And it's because they're like young women, you know. I think that's, and might have a small crossover idea and of ideology in terms of what they both believe. But what I find people misconstrue here a lot is the idea of left and right. And they're very different things in America than they are here. But a lot of people here will talk about them in the American context, whereas our government, which would be center right, is, you know, a lot of people in America will consider them communists because there's a public healthcare system. I don't think people quite wrap their heads around that. Like, especially in the last general election and some of the local elections before that, where you had figures from the right or the far right run, and they would throw stuff like that out, like phrases like freedom of speech, and that's all important from America. And or Jacob Rees-Mogg in doing stuff on GB News as a former minister with the Tory party, and reform, and like leaning into the culture war stuff because it's a distraction. And every once in a while you'll get somebody in a major party or in government try dip their toe into it like that here. And some of the pushback that we got when we made Amplified was that we didn't have, again, any figures from the right in it, although we tried. And that was frustrating because I was more than open to speaking to people from the right. But there's also an element of that if it's raining outside, if it's raining outside now, and I look out the window and I see that it's raining, and somebody else looks out the window and they're like, no, it's not raining. Why would I speak to the person who says it's not raining? So, and that's obviously
call that rain.
Yeah, it was like, is it raining? And then there's a distraction or something around it. So there's an element to that too. But yeah, there's a tendency, I think, to overanalyze as well, and I'm conscious of that too, because it is something that I do. And Irish politics isn't as bombastic as American politics, but I feel like people are trying to make it that way. And I think you can hold but I think you can hold your politicians to account without devolving to the 24-hour urgency of the news cycle or clickbait or whatever it is, and have conversations with people. And I think you saw that in the presidential election where, you know, one candidate came across like a human being who was authentic in our conversations, and the others kind of came across very media trained and a little bit inauthentic. And I think the public can smell that.
One thing I noticed when I started writing online, it was all kind of memoir stuff I was doing, you know, travel stories. And they used to do really well until they changed the algorithm to kind of more quick, kind of, you know, newsy, funny. So I started doing satirical news things on America. And I became shocked at how easy it was for something to go viral, you know? And we're like, oh, well, if I need a bit of money this week or this month, all I got to do is write a 3-minute piece on MAGA, blah, 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 does this. And then I write it in my Kent Brockman kind of like, you know, good evening, America, blah, blah, blah. And bada bing, bada boom. Like 90% of the time it would go viral. And I had to stop because my other writing was completely suffering, you know? Like, it wasn't my passion at all. So I can completely understand someone who's in media or in podcasting or who runs a news agency kind of saying, like, guys, we need eyeballs right now, you know? Like, there is an element where the consumer has to take some responsibility, you know, and put down the hamburger, you know? Like, it's not just all on the media.
Yeah, people, I think people have the capacity to take in so much information, only so much information. And that's the issue, you know, like one of the publications I ran, the last publication I ran, I tried a very different approach to putting content out there. It was as COVID was just in the height of it and then tapering down. And I refused to do COVID numbers. I was like, we're not doing COVID numbers. They're easy clicks.
Crazy.
And that's, you know, probably me a bit hoity or whatever. And we would have gotten the easy clicks if that was the case.
Yeah.
But I was like, let's explain to people what's going on. And then that's idealism. And, you know, and I've done the other stuff. I've done not awful, but I've done really kind of like low-hanging fruit stories as well over the years, especially as you start off. And when you start to see what works and what doesn't work from looking at live analytics of traffic, it's really depressing.
It is. It breaks your heart, like.
Yeah, and it's like breaking through is tough, and I think breaking through now is tougher than ever. Like you can have a whole conversation around independent journalism and independent media, but really are, and this is our next project, but really are you independent if you're relying on algorithms, if you're relying on the social media platforms, if you're relying on people seeing the content that you're putting out, seeing your perspective. Because sometimes it can be easy, and I think you saw this with TikTok, that I had a bunch of stuff go viral as well, and following blew up, and then you could just, at a certain point, they just decided they didn't really want people talking about politics or a certain kind of politics.
I have a good friend. His name is Josh Porter, and he's traveling from the tip of South America to the Arctic in tuk-tuks with his friend. And they did it in Africa as well, and they're raising money. They're fantastic guys. They're all into nature and stuff, you know? And he had videos on TikTok that had 80 to 100 million views, okay? And TikTok gave him nothing for it. Like, and he was monetized, you know? And for the same video, YouTube, of course, paid out. But just, he said just one day, it just, you know, they turned off the tap, you know, and they relied on it to, you know, they're not just people in their room who have like their own job and they're doing funny videos. They're actually people who are actually out in the wild trying to educate people, do this, and then it gets shut off. So I found that kind of very interesting. I have a theory that like there's so many creators on TikTok now that are just happy to make like 20, 30 bucks a week as like a bit of, you know, drinking money, that like everyone's a creator now, whether you're in a drone, in a tuk-tuk in South America, risking your life, or if you have a filter in your basement. The algorithm thinks you're just all creators, you know?
Yeah,
and they're just
the monetization of content for sure. Yeah, it's democratization of content. Sorry, it's that. Like the people are comparing YouTube to Netflix now. So when Netflix were trying to buy Paramount Pictures, when Netflix were trying to buy Warner Brothers, Netflix said, everybody was like, well, you're going to be a massive company. You're going to be too big then. You know, you're going to be bigger than everybody else. And Netflix's argument was, well, not really, because YouTube is much bigger than us. So our competition is actually YouTube. But there's a massive difference in the type of content that goes out on Netflix and the type of content that goes out, a lot of the type of content that goes out on YouTube, because it's user generated.
Well, like YouTube had the same thing, though. Sorry to cut across you, but they had the same thing years ago with Adpocalypse, you know, and a lot of like Casey Neistat talked about it a lot. And it seems now they're having their like AI apocalypse, you know, where people are worried if they, even if it's human based, if they used a thumbnail that was AI, it would maybe demonetize them or something like that. But anyway, I better start the exam, because that's why we're here, okay? I could talk all day. I'm a big talker. All right, so the IELTS Part 1 exam, okay?
Okay.
When students take the IELTS Part 1 speaking, they're expected to answer the question and give 1 or 2 follow-up details, okay? So it's basically short answers. So I'm going to ask you those questions now. And then I'm going to score you.
Mike Sheridan takes the IELTS speaking exam.
And compare you to other people. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So, do you enjoy watching documentaries?
Yes.
We're going to need more than that, Mike.
I do enjoy watching documentaries, especially now from somebody who's made some, because I see stuff I wouldn't have seen before I made them, if that makes sense. So I understand the process and how they're made, and respect them in a lot more in some ways, and also can be more critical internally in some ways when you know how something is made.
Great answer. Okay. Do you prefer watching films at home or in the cinema?
I like watching films both at home and in the cinema, although the experience of seeing a great movie in the cinema is, whether it be nostalgia or whatever from my childhood, there's nothing like it. Walking out of cinema after a great movie and talking to the person that you were with and having the same reaction to a great piece of art, a great blockbuster, wherever it is, I think is such an incredible feeling. And I don't think you can replicate that at home.
Right. Is there a filmmaker or journalist you admire?
There's so many filmmakers and journalists I admire. The filmmakers, directors, I'm a huge admirer of Michael Mann, David Fincher, Catherine Bigelow. There's so many. Journalists, there's a movie called The Insider about a whistleblower called Lowell Bergman. Sorry, Jeffrey Wigand, and the journalist called Lowell Bergman, who was a producer for 60 Minutes, and how they handled CBS, which is obviously something that's going on at the moment, and big nicotine, basically, and the whole fallout from big nicotine, and saying that cigarettes weren't addictive. It's a masterpiece of a movie. It's directed by Michael Mann, and Lowell Bergman was the journalist and the producer at 60 Minutes who was involved in blowing that story up and getting Jeffrey Wigand's story out there.
Okay, great. All right, IELTS Part 2. In IELTS Part 2, students are expected to look at a cue card, which you don't have, unfortunately. And you can think about it for 1 minute if you need to. You might not need to. You can answer straight away. So this is your cue card. You should speak for about 2 minutes. Describe a film, documentary, or interview that had a strong effect on you. You should say what it was, when you first saw or heard it, what it was about, and explain why it stayed with you. And like, if you don't hit those marks, it's okay. You can just insert.
There's a documentary I saw a few months ago called Predators that is about, there was a show on American television called To Catch a Predator, which was basically these film stings where they would have people pretend to be younger teenage people chatting to older men online, and when the older men would turn up, the camera crew will come out and they would capture them on film. I've never seen such a documentary explore the nuances of such an almost taboo subject in a searingly devastating way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to give too much away because I think it's a really important documentary and a really powerful documentary that's worth really taking time to consume and let us sit with you afterwards. It doesn't go down the obvious routes of what you think it will, but it just stayed with me. It's one of the best documentaries I've seen in years. It's a really powerful piece of work.
Okay, great. All right, one more. This is IELTS Part 3. Usually there's a few questions, but I think one is enough for you. Why do some documentaries have a stronger effect than fictional films?
That's a really good question. I think because you see the reality of the impact of whatever situation it is that you're consuming. So a few years ago, during COVID, pre-COVID, it was stuff like documentaries on Netflix, like To Catch a Murderer, or To Make a Murderer, or The Staircase, or these type of documentaries. Those documentaries had huge cultural impacts, I think, because people saw how devastating the wrong decisions being made can have on people's lives, or the right decisions on wherever your perspective is. But you see the reality of choices that people have made in such a profoundly tough way. And I think if you are a normal human being and you have a base level of empathy, to watch those two documentaries are just examples, but to watch people go through something in any type of popular culture, but I'd see them be filmed, see them live their lives, hear their story, hear other people talk about their story. It's impossible not to feel something if you have a base level of empathy. And I think that's where documentaries in that respect can really have an impact. There's also, there's documentaries that can explain issues and investigate issues, and they're different things. But I think those emotive human stories at their core are what really impacts people. I feel.
Okay, great. Got to mark your score now. This will take about 30 minutes. You can just sit there. No, it was fantastic. I would give that one of the highest scores. One of the highest scores in the IELTS is band 9. I think it would be silly of me not to assume, this is unofficial, of course. I think I'll give you the highest mark, band 9. Michael Hingson, the author of Thunderdog, the blind 9/11 survivor, he gave a fantastic part 2, a really lovely part 2. Timothy Murphy cursed too much. I'm joking, if Tim, if you're watching. And Josh Porter and David McElroy also had fantastic answers. But I really loved your answers, especially for the topic that we're speaking about today. They were very relevant. So, Mike, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you saying yes to this.
No worries at all. I really appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to watching some more of your interviews as well.
Yeah, they're slowly, hopefully getting better as I learn how to edit and fix my lighting. But you know, these days, even writers and teachers, we have to do everything, you know? It's fun.
Everybody's a multimedia journalist now. You have to be.
Yeah, you have to be. We have to build, we have to create, we have to make our portfolios. But anyway, I'm going to share this on Substack, YouTube. Mike Sheridan is on Substack as well, on TikTok. I assume you're on YouTube and definitely with the Dells, which I highly recommend going and checking out. There's some fantastic interviews with Bill Burr, Keanu Reeves, like you name it, they're fantastic. And Jordan Peterson, as we mentioned. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we end the talk?
No, if the documentary sounds interesting to you, if Amplified sounds interesting to you, you can rent it Amazon, Apple, YouTube Movies, and IFI International. If you're outside of Ireland, so you can rent it for $5 there.
Okay, great. All right, Mike, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Peter.
Have a great
Really
day.
appreciate it, man. Lovely to
Bye-bye.
meet you.
You
Take
too.
care.